Just to let you know, a little later in the program, we're going to be talking to a local law enforcer just about some issues taking place here as we wind down summer. We're pretty close now to Labor Day, and that means a lot of people still trying to squeeze in the last of the summer fun, and sometimes they overdo it just a bit. We'll be talking about that coming up in about 20 minutes. Also, just after 9 o'clock news this morning, we have some people from the Twin Falls County Fair Foundation. They'll be joining us because the 100th anniversary of the fair is on the way. We're in year 99. So over the next 12 months, there's going to be quite a celebratory aspect to all of this, and very much of a fundraising appeal going on. So those things we'll be talking about a little later in the show. But first, I wanted to open up about, I think, a story that a good deal of the country was talking about, especially yesterday. Do you know that one of the malcontents at the organization known as Black Lives Matter, after 3 white people were shot yesterday on live television in Virginia, 2 of them shot dead, he refused at first to believe that it had been a fellow member of his race who had pulled the trigger. And he was taking to Twitter and just, going on and on about how media was evil and trying to portray this as a black on white crime. And lo and behold, it was. That guy from Black Lives Matter has apparently crawled back into his hole, and we haven't heard anything from him since then. Funny how that works. And I've been asking the question myself on social media over the last 24 hours, do white lives matter? Because this was apparently somewhat of a racial shooting. The guy claimed that he had been treated poorly because of the color of his skin at several TV stations. He'd been fired at several TV stations. Apparently, no evidence was ever turned up that anyone had actually treated him poorly because of the color of his skin. In fact, he had been treated because he was treated that way and fired because he was the newsroom ass. He was very difficult to deal with. Apparently, people were uncomfortable dealing with him. Apparently, when he was fired 2 years ago from the station in Virginia, he had to be escorted from the building by police because he refused to leave. This guy had some troubles. He was also a homosexual, and he claims he was treated poorly because of that. So, do straight people's lives matter? There's a question for you. You've got a black homosexual, angry man gunning down a couple of people that he used to work with, and additionally, a woman they were interviewing who he probably, if he knew her just on the periphery of his life, decided to shoot her as well. Now, I've got to tell you, the media's reaction to this, if this had been, let's say, a disgruntled former white employee shooting down a black photographer and a black reporter and a black woman being interviewed, how do you think that would be reported compared to what we're seeing now? Well, instead, the knee-jerk reaction from media and the American left, including its leader, Barack Hussein Obama, is for more gun confiscation. This is Mr. Obama's reaction while he was being interviewed by WPVI-TV in Philadelphia yesterday.
Yeah, my heart goes out to the families who've been affected. As you point out, sadly, gun violence is in the environment in this country every single day. Some of this violence can't be prevented, but a whole lot of it can if we are doing a better job of making sure that people who have problems, people who shouldn't have guns, don't have them.
In other words, whoever we designate, such as a Navy veteran in Priest Lake, Idaho, and then we'll go over and we'll seize his firearms because, well, he's old and he might be incapacitated, so we don't want him to have any firearms. Thank you for your service, by the way, but we're coming to take your guns. I'm telling you as well, you may have heard him in that soundbite. He says, as you have pointed out, he says to the reporter, as you have pointed out. So another one of your mainstream media people here adopting that line. In other words, not being objective, but guns are bad. Bad, 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 bad. No, the shooter was bad. He was an evil human being. Can we make that clear? And he was an evil human being in all of the newsrooms that he worked in for many, many years before that, walking around with a chip on his shoulder, using the color of his skin and his sexual issues as his excuse for his own failures in life, and then claiming that that was the reason that he couldn't succeed. 811, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. You can reach our program this morning at 736-0300. It's 60, coming up on 812. We'll go to the telephones, and you're on the air on Top Story. All right, we'll try again. You know what? I know sometimes the phones will click out. So I'm not going to say to anyone, hey, stay on the line, because I know that after about 2 minutes, my own experience, your phone happens to go dead. You're up next, and you're on the air on Top Story.
Yeah, yesterday while I was listening to this on the radio, I could have swore that I heard in their haste, and whether or not it was Fox, and Fox is not always as pure as they ought to be. Of course, my opinion means nothing, but whether or not it's CBS or ABC or NBC radio network, I could have swore they said that this shooter was white. And then I got home last night, and I was just curious because it's kind of funny. They always make sure that if it is white, that we know. They always make sure that if he is a Republican, that we know.
Yes.
But sometimes it's the other side. They are kind of vague about it. And then I come home and see that he's, colored. And I thought, well, of course, what's new? At the top of every hour, we get fed a load of BS, skewed BS every day throughout the day as we're listening to our programs.
Well, thank you much for the telephone call. And just to note, he is not a Republican. They would have told you about that right away, as the caller pointed out. He is a Democrat, or was a Democrat. He's now gone to straight down to hell, where he's burning forever for the remainder of time, as we know it. But he was a Democrat because he was actually covering the elections in 2012, walking around on air with an Obama button, and he was told, remove that, because they didn't want him to be showing his bias while he was reporting on the air, which pretty much would happen at any TV station. If I had been working in TV with a Romney button on, I would have been told, you've got to remove that. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on KLIX.
Yeah, Bill, it was my phone that got dropped.
Oh, okay. No problem.
Anyway, I just think it's funny, within minutes of this thing happening, Hillary Clinton's bucking up about gun control. But they need to watch what they're saying, because what is the percentage of people that use guns for violence? How do they vote?
Yeah, I would say that most people I know who know how to handle a firearm and do it for hunting purposes and the like, or target shooting, generally are very nice people, and they all vote Republican.
And the people that are creating all the killings and murders and everything are very angry other people.
And often believe that the world owes them a living.
Right. You see, and his whole thing in his 20-something page manifesto was that life wasn't fair, and that he didn't get his fair shake. Well, there's so much for those, trophies and ribbons just for showing up.
Yes. Thank you much for the call. He apparently expected that. Just give me the paycheck. I worked with people like that. You hire them, and they expect that, they really, now that they're there, they can mail it in, and that they're going to just collect the paycheck every couple of weeks. They were the same people back in college. I had friends in college. They just wanted the diploma because they figured the diploma will make it easier for me to get a higher salary when I get out of here. But they didn't show up for class very often. They just loafed around, and they just barely scraped by in order to get that diploma. And that's the attitude of a lot of people out there. Yes, a lot of them happen to be Democrats. 8:15, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com, which means online. You can listen to us anywhere all over the world. All you have to do is click on the Listen Live button. Even before the president actually had an opportunity to speak, even before the president spoke, the White House was already working the gun control angle. This is White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest, and he's talking already about gun control.
This is another example of gun violence that is becoming all too common in communities large and small, all across the United States.
And he goes on to say, the reason that this happened is because of Republicans who control both houses of Congress. If the Democrats had control of both houses of Congress, these two people would still be alive today.
While there is no piece of legislation that will end all violence in this country, there are some common sense things that only Congress can do that we know would have a tangible impact in reducing gun violence in this country. And Congress could take those steps in a way that would not infringe on the constitutional rights of law-abiding Americans.
So all of you people out there who have voted for Republicans, you responsible gun owners, you responsible hunters, you're responsible as well for these two people being killed yesterday by this angry black homosexual man who couldn't get his way in the office. We want you to know that at the White House, and we will do everything we can to prevent Republicans from either voting, such as we did in Philadelphia with the Black Panther Party, or we will do everything we can to prevent Republicans. It's getting completely out of hand, the propaganda that is being spewed from the American left, and the White House is simply just a megaphone for it. What you hear in the academic left, what you hear in the Hollywood left, they just keep repeating the same old tired phrases, blaming everyone else. You know what? I said yesterday on the program, if we didn't have to deal with affirmative action programs that sometimes force employers to hire people who are powder kegs and dangerous and the like, if they could just hire the best people available, the people who come in with the sunniest dispositions, the people who are going to come in every day and hit the ground running, those are what you want in the workplace. And if it was easy to get rid of people, and that's the other part of this, and I know this from my own experience in television management, we had an individual who was just completely off the rails. She was a woman of color, and she was just a bull in a china shop in the newsroom. And there was nothing I was told I could really do about it. So eventually, when one of my sister stations called and said we'd like to hire her, I said, oh, with my blessing. And they did. And then after a year there at the sister station, when someone called from North Carolina and said we'd like to hire her for a job, my colleague and friend who was the news director at that station said, please do. So that's how it was. So we just kept passing this person up the line because it was practically impossible to fire her. And the company was petrified that if we did, then she would come in and claim that we had discriminated against her and that for that reason the company would be forced to give half its profits to her. And they didn't. This is the way of the world in liberal America. Why don't we get things done any longer? Well, I think we have our answers, don't we? We used to have a can-do attitude. Over the last 50 years, we've been inculcated in our schools and our colleges and through media, and even many of our own Republican politicians who claim to be conservatives, they buy into this and they sell this claptrap right back to us. Hey, I've got to mention, we've got a member of the law enforcement community, Ken Menzel, joining us in just a few minutes from the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Department. When Tim was here a couple of weeks ago, he pointed out that Ken gets way too much vacation. But he's back to work. We'll have some news from the Sheriff's Department coming up in just a few minutes.